Hey guys, today I wanted to make a quick video on a really important topic that I struggled with when I first started with Unreal Engine. Setting up depth of field on a cinematic camera. So let's break it down and get it sorted together. And before starting, I really wanted to thank you because we are more and more on the channel. Thank you for that guys and for all your support and your nice comments. So don't forget to subscribe if you're new and let's get started. For today's video, we'll be working on a tutorial using the newly released and free pack Dark Realms, created by the Quixel team. I highly recommend downloading and exploring this pack because it's truly awesome. So here's the context. You've got your scene or shot ready, and now you want to fine-tune your camera settings. We'll start with the static shot, then move on to an animated one. Here's our static shot with the cinematic camera actor. Once you add your camera to the sequencer, it will automatically set up default parameters for you to tweak, as well as your camera track. This track is crucial to render what your camera captures, don't forget it. Now let's talk about adjusting the depth of field. Let's say you've set your camera to the 69 DSLR preset, which stands for Digital Single Lens Reflex Camera and is a common standard. We'll use a 200mm lens for this tutorial since it makes achieving strong depth of field effects much easier. At first glance, you'll probably notice the image is blurry as hell. To fix this quickly, and you might already know that, head over to the Focus Settings tab, expand it, and use the option to sample scene depths by directly selecting the object you want to focus on. This is simple and works beautifully, especially with this type of lens. That's a great start, but how does depth of field actually work? And how you can refine these settings, especially when using all the lenses? Let's dive in. You can't really adjust the focus distance alone to achieve a good depth of field. In fact, getting the right focus depends heavily on another key parameter, the aperture. If you tweak the aperture value, you'll notice that directly impacts the intensity of the blur effect in your scene. You might also observe there's a range of clamped values from 2 to 22 with the 200mm length that you can't overwrite at the moment. To put it simply, the aperture controls how wide your camera lens opens. The wider the opening, the shallower the depth of field, creating a stronger blur effect on objects out of focus. This effect is called bokeh. A wider aperture also allows more light into the camera. The value you manipulate for the aperture is called f-stop. The amount of light we let enter is what we call the exposure. The smaller the f number, the larger the aperture. The larger the f number, the smaller the aperture. So if you have low values, you should get a more intense bokeh and more light coming in. But hold on, shouldn't opening the aperture also let in more lights and brighten the image in the scene here? So what's going on in my scene? Normally you'd be right. However, in Unreal Engine, we're only adjusting the depth of field for now, and here's why. The post-process volume in the scene manages exposure separately. In real life, aperture affects both depth of field and exposure, since they are interconnected. But in Unreal, these two are split, as I said. Depth of field is handled by the camera, while exposure is controlled by the post-process volume. So if you want to mimic real-world behavior, you can go to the post-process volume settings, find the metering mode under exposure settings, and switch it to manual. Now when you adjust the aperture in your camera, you'll see both the depth of field and exposure change together.
Hey Stephane, can we override the minimum and maximum aperture settings?
Absolutely, that's another key connection to keep in mind. Let's switch the metering mode back to auto so we can focus solely on depth of field. In your camera's details panel, if you expand the lens settings, you'll find the minimum and maximum f-stop values, which corresponds to the aperture. This is where it can be tricky if you don't have much background in photography. If you play with these values, you can adjust them to fine-tune the effect. For instance, I often set the minimum value very low, like 0.1, to exaggerate the intensity of the bokeh. This lets me precisely place my focus points before refining it for the final setup. You can either pick an actor in your scene, or manually set a custom distance, using the Draw Debug Plane tool to better visualize where your focus is located. However, be cautious when setting the aperture too low. While it can give you dramatic effects, it might introduce artifacts in your final render. So keep this in mind while tweaking your settings here. Now let's talk about animated cameras. For example, imagine you're creating a simple traveling movement. You've set up the lens and aperture setting on the first frame, but as the camera moves closer to the subject and the animation plays, the focus goes out. One solution is to manually animate the focus settings using the track already available by default in the sequencer. For simple movements, this works fine. However, for more complex ones, you can use the tracking method. When you switch to this method, new parameters appears below. Expand the settings and you'll see options for further adjustments. First, define the actor you want to track. Keep in mind that the tracking point is based on the actor's origin. For example, with the skeletal mesh, the origin might be at the feet. You can refine this position using the relative offsets attributes to adjust the tracking points. And to visualize the tracking, enable Draw Debug Tracking Focus Points. That will help you a lot. So once that's done, play your animation or pilot the camera around the scene, and you'll see the focus remains on points, always matching the targets. To add more realism, you can enable smooth focus changes. This feature unlocks the end-top speed attributes, allowing you to introduce a slight delay in the focus adjustments. This creates a smoother, more cinematic effect that enhances the realism of your scene. Et voilà! I hoped I helped clarify this important topic, guys, and feel free to share your thoughts and comments because you will help the community here. Thanks a lot, see you next week for a new video. Ciao!